seen many defendants over the decades. He was diabolical.
Welcome to WatchMojo UK, and today we'll be counting down our picks for the top 10 British true crime documentaries and docuseries.
His level of fame gave him every door open. He wanted his fame to go beyond anything and anybody.
Before we begin, we publish new content every day, so be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos.
For this list, we're looking at accounts of Britain's most heinous crimes and are including standalone episodes and dramatizations as well. Let us know in the comments what your favourite documentary is. Number 10. White House Farm, 2020.
Best case scenario, 4 hostages and another with a gun.
Worst case?
4 murders and another with a gun.
These grisly murders shocked Essex back in 1985, as did the ensuing court case when the truth began to come out. Initially, the police believed that the unstable daughter of the Bamber family had murdered them all with a rifle and then turned the rifle on herself.
So you said the brother was meeting us here?
Yeah, he called it in. A Jeremy Bamber. It sounded like some sort of domestic, firearms possibly involved.
But police soon found strange inconsistencies with the crime scene and the surviving son, Jeremy's, account of the night. In real life, Bamber proclaims his innocence to this day, but he was arrested, charged, and convicted of the murders.
Hey, Stan.
How's it looking in there?
5 dead, would you believe, including 2 kids.
Jesus.
His motive was a desire to claim the family's inheritance early. This dramatization follows the murders, Jeremy's arrest, and his trial. Number 9. Real Crime, Tesco Bomber, 2009. In the year 2000, British supermarkets were terrorised for almost 6 months by a shadowy criminal threatening to send pipe bombs to Tesco customers.
A bomber on the loose, a town in fear. Behind the campaign of terror, a plot to extort millions from Britain's biggest retailer.
While the threats looked completely ridiculous at first, the police believed they were genuine, and a huge manhunt got underway.
What he required was to be able to withdraw £1,000 per club card. If all the club cards were set up to withdraw £1,000, effectively Tesco's could lose £50 million in a day.
This episode of ITV's true crime series, Real Crime, followed the investigation, which eventually identified the bomber as Robert Dyer. Like a knockoff version of the Zodiac Killer, Dyer sent taunting letters and ciphers to the police, daring them to find him.
The letter left on the newsagent's photocopier contained a chilling threat. It demanded money from Tesco and warned of deadly consequences if the company failed to comply.
They did find him, and he was sent down, luckily, before taking any lives or getting the cash he wanted from Tesco. Just 1 woman was injured during the campaign. Number 8. The Spy Who Went Into the Cold, 2013.
On a stormy night in Beirut, a double life that had lasted 30 years ended when he defected to Russia.
He was one of the worst traitors in history.
This documentary sheds light on a dark piece of Britain's Cold War history, following the activities of Kim Philby, an MI6 agent who defected to the KGB in the 60s.
Dad was Harold Adrian Russell Philby, better known to the world as Kim. An Englishman who spied for the Soviet Union.
But 10 years before his final defection, after which he fled to Russia, he was still under suspicion from British intelligence. Philby was one of the notorious Cambridge Five, a spy ring that fed British government secrets to the Soviet Union for years.
The great fear then was the rise of fascists all over Europe. The question was, what could people like him do about it?
The documentary is a portrait of Philby and his family, trying to understand his motives for betraying Britain. In his later years in the USSR, Philby said it was his upper-class upbringing that enabled him to spy so brazenly for so many years. Number 7. Darkland, The Hunt for Wales' Worst Serial Killer, 2022. The BBC's Darkland took a victim-centric approach to the Welsh crimes it covered, but this special edition in 2022 focused on the psychology of Peter Moore, one of the most dangerous serial killers the country has ever seen.
Peter Moore was sent to jail a quarter of a century ago, but the pain that his victims' families still feel is clear in Lynn Haygarth's letter.
In 1995, he killed 4 men, but he attacked and traumatized dozens more in the years prior. Known as the Man in Black, he was widely feared in North Wales during his reign of terror.
And therefore, he knows he can get away with it. And he did for many, many years. very successfully.
After his crimes escalated to murder, the police were finally able to arrest and sentence him. As well as looking at more himself, Darkland talked to the families of the victims and tried to bring some closure to their lives.
I'd like to know, tell me please exactly what happened to my brother. I want the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
Number 6, Des, 2020.
Another thing, has there been any newspaper reports about me?
There was one, yes.
Well, may I have a copy?
I'll ask.
For 5 years, Dennis Nilsen committed murders around London, murders which weren't identified as being the work of a single killer until long after they began.
195 Melrose Avenue, N2. There, you'll find the remains of 12 or 13 people dating back to 1978.
There were documentaries about Nilsen, but this dramatization of his arrest stars David Tennant as the killer, seeing him finally arrested for his crimes. It shockingly begins with Nilsen calling the police himself and revealing a body in his flat.
Right, don't mug me about. Where's the rest of the body?
In the cupboard.
It also stars the criminally underrated Daniel Mays as the lead detective on the case. Certainly not for the faint of heart. It's a critically acclaimed examination of this monstrous serial killer.
Why did you do this?
Well, I don't really know. I was sort of hoping you could tell me that.
Number 5, Appropriate Adult, 2011. Fred and Rose West killed roughly a dozen people over the better part of 2 decades. Though some of those were perpetrated by Fred alone before their marriage, most of their crimes were done together.
Just Heather right buried in that garden. There's more.
More?
You don't believe it. Not that you can let on to the police, I told you, eh? I keep everything I say in confidence.
This drama stars Emily Watson as Janet Leach, a social worker who was named Fred West's appropriate adult during his interrogations. She was an innocent woman subject to the vile details of the killings.
You have done this before?
Oh no, but I've done the training.
This was Leach's first job serving as an appropriate adult, which came about because West couldn't read, and it was she who convinced West to finally confess.
You sure you buried Heather all in one place?
You what?
You didn't scatter any of her body around the garden?
No.
Because they found another body part in another part of the garden.
The show was well received, but was slammed by the daughter of Fred West for trying to make money from the devastating crimes. Number 4, Unforgiven, 2001. Few crimes have shocked and appalled the British public like the murder of James Bulger in 1993, when he was only 2 years old.
We all recognise the images. The Strand shopping centre in Bootle. A young child being led away by 2 older boys.
Bulger was horrifyingly kidnapped and killed by 2 10-year-olds, Robert Thompson and John Venables. It was a landmark case, bringing about debates on both the British legal system and how it was set up to treat young offenders, and the abject poverty experienced in some areas of Liverpool.
How has the system dealt with 10-year-old murderers? What treatment have they had? Are they still dangerous?
This documentary was an episode of Channel 4's hit series Dispatches, and was released only 8 years after the crime. It focused largely on the conversations around the killer's time in custody and whether they could ever be rehabilitated.
What do we do with them? We keep them locked up for life. Because at the end of the day, it's Ralph and Denise and the rest of their families and friends that are doing a life sentence.
Number 3, The Ripper, 2020. Between 1975 and 1981, Peter Sutcliffe killed around a dozen women and attacked many more in the north of England.
Police are investigating the discovery of a woman's body. The woman, who hasn't yet been identified, was found on a playing field in the Chapeltown district of Leeds.
He was dubbed the Yorkshire Ripper because, like Jack the Ripper, he targeted working girls. This Netflix documentary delves into Sutcliffe's reign of terror and how he was able to get away with it for so long.
You'd have to draw on your experience and say that this was done by somebody who is disturbed to some considerable degree.
It looks at the ineptitude of West Yorkshire police investigating the crime, who kept inefficient records and failed to follow up on many leads that pointed to Sutcliffe.
Somebody goes out at random and thinks, right, I'm going to kill somebody tonight, and finds an opportunity and takes full advantage of that opportunity.
It's a damning look at the failure of British law enforcement to protect the women and girls who worked the streets of Leeds, Sheffield and Manchester. Number 2, Jimmy Savile, A British Horror Story, 2022. now one of the most notorious figures in British culture. Upon his death in 2011, hundreds of allegations against TV personality and presenter Jimmy Savile came to light.
By far, to my mind, the best part of the book is the anecdotes, which were very funny, and I hope in the next one that you're going to tell a lot of anecdotes.
I'd probably finish up doing about 15 years in the nick if I did that.
With his victims no longer living in fear, Savile's reputation and legacy were destroyed. Widely known in Britain, this Netflix documentary brought the monstrous crimes of Savile to a wider audience.
I work 2 days a week as a porter at Leeds Infirmary. Just as a porter, not as a special porter, not as an odd porter, a peculiar porter, just a porter. And it's really wonderful.
It looks at how Savile was able to get away with it for decades, dying without facing retribution, and how various institutions ignored and may have even enabled his abuse.
How on earth do you raise £10 million in 3 years?
However, it's also been criticised for keeping Savile in the public eye, even a decade on from his death. Number 1. The disappearance of Madeleine McCann, 2019. In 2007, 3-year-old Madeleine McCann disappeared during a family holiday to Portugal.
I don't remember any child abduction case globally larger, more high profile, more impactful than Madeleine McCann.
What followed was one of the most sensationalized crimes in living memory, with newspapers around the world reporting non-stop for years on end about what happened to Madeleine.
She opened the door again, and this time realized that Madeleine's bed was empty.
Years later, and the police are still none the wiser about what really happened. The documentary follows the disappearance itself, the investigation, the media circus, and the many theories about how and why Madeleine vanished.
And then just went flying out down to the tapas restaurant, shouting, "Someone's taken Madeleine." And that's when the nightmare started.
It was certainly divisive, with some praising its deep coverage of the case and others saying it lent too heavily into conspiracy theories about the parents.
It operated a night creche. All of the McCann group decided that this really didn't suit them.
Watch it and decide for yourself.
Do you agree with our picks? Check out this other recent clip from WatchMojo UK and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos.